And I might mute you if you are unmuted so that I don't hear the hockey game you were listening to in the background or any barking dogs. Um, I would like to say at the beginning of this that these video conferences are supported by our friends at the Department of Canadian Heritage, Patrimoine Canadien, who fund the farm food forums and farm the activities of the Quebec Farmers Association in general. Um, Marshall, how are you feeling?
I'm having a good day for change.
I'm glad. Thank you for suffering with me through the technical details. I really appreciate it. And every time that Zoom does an update, there's a part of me that shudders inside because I know they will have changed something. But we have a healthy number of our friends and fellow producers from Quebec and Ontario and elsewhere on the call. We are doing a video conference like this every month. And we have ones lined up for April 15th and for May 27th, and I will tell you about those at the end of this. Um, our guest tonight is our friend Marshall Buchanan, who is living in Scotchbush, Ontario, and has had a very varied and fascinating career as a forestry expert and consultant. He has also worked with Indigenous farmers and farmers up in northern Canada. His farm in Scotchbush, Ontario, which is in Renfrew County, um, he describes in the title of this video conference as a derelict farm. And he's going to tell us about how moving to that farm informed and was an extension of a lot of his beliefs in nature, conservation, regenerative agriculture, and land use practices. He's also a former candidate for the new Democratic Party in his riding. That is a party that is having its leadership race this month, which many of us are watching. Marshall, thank you so much for being here. Greatly appreciate it. Excited to hear your talk from derelict farm to experimental progress, bringing a 19th century farm into the modern economy. You're on a call with a lot of producers who inherited what they might describe as derelict farms and also took some over and are working on them and creating great new agriculture from old things. So thank you so much for having the courage and the chutzpah to come and speak to us. I really appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure. I'm just gonna, oops, there we
Yeah,
go.
yeah, your screen is looking great, and we can see the nice Ottawa Valley Farm to Fork logo. Everything seems absolutely perfect. And if anyone can't hear or is having any problems, then you can write to me in the chat by going down to the bottom and clicking on the little shape that looks like a comic book dialogue speech bubble. Um, and we will get you sorted. Anyhow, Marshall, thank you so much for being here. Really looking forward to it.
Okay. So I I I feel like I should, give a little disclaimer. Like nothing that I say is necessarily true or right, but it's based on my life experience, which is starting to add up, actually. So I I've put in a bit of a subtitle called "The Art of Practice," um, because I think that is really key. Because everyone that is lucky enough to have a piece of land um, is trying to practicing agriculture and growing food and reaching out to their community in some way. And they articulate their vision in a very unique style. And I think it's really important to consider each person's style of farming as their own art of practice. And I didn't I never thought I would be a farmer, actually, although I loved living and visiting. I spent many summers on my uncle's farm near Saint Jerome, Quebec, where the town is actually Saint Sophie de la Corne, if you know that, just north of Montreal. And I didn't, growing up in Markham, I never thought I could ever be able to afford a piece of land and be able to farm. But as I was growing up, I realized I did not want to live in the suburbs. And I I just kept waiting till I would find the opportunity in my life to buy a piece of land. So we bought a farm in Renfrew County because my wife is from Cartierville, Quebec. It's Montreal there. So she didn't want to be too far from her family. And so we thought about the Ottawa Valley. And I had been working as a forester, and I knew there was a lot of demand for native trees, and that native tree planting was going gangbusters in the GTA, because they were restoring all kinds of land and all the floodplains where houses and business parks couldn't be built. They were planting to trees. And so I thought, well, if I just had land, I could start growing seedlings and growing them to a certain size, like you see in that picture. And that would be a way I could be involved in forestry and living on a farm. And that worked very well. That actually generated real income that was paying for things. Um, And then of course, we had this property, and our neighbors wanted to rent it from us to pasture their own cattle. So after a couple of years, we thought we should get get going on that. And then it became this fun thing about, every time we were having dinner, we'd look at our plate and go, how much of this comes from our farm? And it grew steadily over the years. And then, we were just once we started growing so much of our own food, we couldn't really go back. And then I realized that my my interest in environmental stewardship could also be fulfilled by pursuing sustainable farming. And I started to realize that some uh, methods of farming had a huge environmental footprint, and I wanted to tackle some of that problem. So we started going to farmers markets with our vegetables, and um, this was in 2008 when we kind of got going on that. And farmers markets were quite a novelty at the time. Every community started to want one, and but it was a tough sell because people would say, well, I can get this cheaper at the grocery store, was the common answer. And but then you know, time kept going on, and people started to think, well, okay, farmers markets are not where you're going to get cheap food, but it's where you're going to get the good stuff. And so then sales started to get easier. And anyway, I started going to the Ottawa farmers market because that's where, there's just unlimited customers, and it was year round, so you could sell at Lansdowne Place. And then in the summer you could also sell. And anyway, so we at the time we when we first bought our farm, we only had 50 acres. And it was a farm that was essentially abandoned. Um, the owner had just had an auction and sold off every gate and everything useful that you need to run a farm and all the equipment. And he had a tenant living there, who he thought he could do a favor to by letting them rent the property while he was renovating it. And then she ended up calling the Ministry of Housing, and and I don't know what she thought she was going to accomplish, but when they inspected the house, they saw that there were no railings on the stairways and the bathrooms weren't finished, and they slapped a work order on the owner, and he had to sell the property in a hurry. And we just happened to be looking at farms, and there were a lot of them available that nobody wanted because at this time it was the recession of 1999, 2000, and there were lots of farms available for cheap. And anyway, we bought this farm, and being only 50 acres, and it didn't have, I mean, it's basically 50 acres, but only about 15 of that was farmable, and the rest of it was forest. And so you couldn't grow enough hay to feed your own animals and have enough pasture and all that stuff. So one of the ideas we had was, well, if we make value added products, then you can take 15 pounds of potatoes, which you can sell for $15 at the right farmer's market. But if you turn them into pierogies, then you can get, $250 from the same 15 pounds of potatoes. So that's what we started doing. And, this was the culture at the time. Every farmers markets were exploding, and all kinds of artisanal foods were being created. We started making sausage rolls from our beef, and now we make bone broth and tallow. That picture on the far left, that's tallow that was just poured in jars and hasn't set yet. Anyway, so we went to like tons of farmers markets, and as long as we went to Ottawa as one of the farmers markets, then you could actually make a bit of a living. But um, the tree nursery was going very well, so I kept my kept practicing that business because I took it to a level where I had a master's degree in forestry, so it was kind of a waste if I didn't use it. And then I got a pituitary tumor in 2014, and I had three neurosurgeries in the coming years. And then I got arthritis in my hips because of all the hormone problems. So I got early arthritis, and then I got artificial cartilage. That's called hip resurfacing on both hips. Yeah. So anyway, by 2017, I was very broken. I couldn't do much. Um, anyway, and in 2017, my dad died. So we inherited some money. And because we'd been living in the area for quite a while, we were able, we knew all the land, and other people's lives are changing. So anyway, this is a map showing all the different little plots of land that we managed to buy. We bought the home farm in the year 2000, and it was just 50 acres. But then our neighbor got divorced, and she had no income, and she wanted to sell off land. She said, "You're either going to get a neighbor or you're going to buy the land that I'm selling. And we had this problem where we had turned like other lots had come up for sale and we didn't buy them right away. Like we didn't have enough cash. And then the people that moved in were, I don't know, I guess a disappointment is the way to call it, where, just shooting guns off all the time and parties and driving around in ATVs and just things that would, we had another neighbor that there was a helicopter flying all over his house because he was growing marijuana at the time.
Yeah.
And that our cattle ended up getting scattered from that surveillance. And they busted out of the pastures and it was just a nuisance. So this time when the land came up for sale, we said, okay, we're going to buy it just so that we have a buffer. And that's why the property has a bit of a funny shape. Anyway,
Hmm.
in 2014, we did scrape together some money and bought 75 acres. And that's where there was a little trailer home, which we converted into a commercial kitchen. So we had our food would be inspected by the health agency and we could sell to grocery stores or at farmers markets and we weren't bothered by the health inspector. And we got a little bit of pasture out of that. And then in 2018, after my dad died, we bought another field because we needed more pasture. At this time, we had like 38 head of cattle. And if there was a drought like there was in 2012, there was the worst drought in 75 years. Like that's a real panic, as you know.
Yeah.
And um, so we needed more pasture. And then but at the same, like when we first got our cows in 2003, a bale of hay, you could get hay for $25 a round bale, and the better hay was $30 a bale. But by 2018, you were paying $60 a bale, and if you were buying a lot of hay, by the time it was delivered to your farm, it was at least another $20. So you're paying $80 a bale, and then sometimes it was up to $100 a bale because there were started to be all these droughts in the spring, several years of spring drought. So then we ended up selling off a lot of the cattle, and now we only have we have 20 to 19 head, and we're scaling back on that. And we don't go to Ottawa anymore because of COVID. We just never went back after COVID, and we decided to cultivate more customers close to where we live. And that was a real, COVID made selling local food a breeze.
Yeah.
People were searching you out because they didn't want to go to the grocery store and possibly get sick. And anyway, then in 2019, we bought this other lot, that's a 50-acre parcel, and we bought it almost entirely for the hayfield that was there and stuff. And it's anyway, so we have this kind of constellation of properties, which is becoming a lot of work to maintain, actually. And I just want to show you the soil map here. We're on a hill between two river valleys. There's the Bon Cher River Valley to the north, and to the south is the Madawaska River Valley. And we're about 300 meters above those valleys. Well, maybe 200 meters above. And it's all forest all around, except for if you can see on the map, it says Scotch Bush Road. And there's this little island of class one farmland right in there, and everything else around is stony and rocky and full of wetlands. And So where we bought the first 50 acres, you can see that's mostly on the class 7 land, which is poor, really only good for pasture or small gardens. But these other properties came up for sale, and that's where we bought them because we knew they were better quality land. And they were cheap because we bought them all before COVID. Oh, and then in 2018, so we were selling at the Westboro market, and that's in Ottawa. And everyone would say, "Where's your farm?" And you tell them Renfrew, and they'd never heard of it. And so I knew that this local food thing was still picking up speed, and I wanted to be the first in my neighborhood to put on a farm to table dinner. So we had renovated a barn, and I started to realize we were getting into agritourism, which I never really thought I'd get into. I remember tourism is always being suggested as a way to generate funding for your farm if you can't do anything else. And I always thought, well, that's not really farming. So I don't really want to do that. And then I realized that if you're selling food direct to the consumer, that agritourism is really a way to build your customer network and educate your customers and reach out. And I changed my tune on that. And also by getting into agritourism, that you're bringing the off-farm job back into being part of the farm operation. So you're actually creating another value off of what you already have. And anyway, just showing that was the poster. We hired a coach, and it brought people from the picked people up at the Ottawa Westboro market. It's an hour and a half drive out to our farm. And the nice thing about the bus anyway was nobody could leave. so so we had a tour and then a dinner, and then there was a warm-up comedian, and then there was Martha Chavez, and then there was a band. Like it was a full night. And some people went home after Martha. If you listen to CBC radio, she's on there all the time on the debaters or the laugh out loud. Anyway, so it was a big success, and we just about broke even. So this is the barn where we held the event, and this is how it looked in 2023, and in 2018 was when we hosted the event. So you can see we didn't do a lot of fixing up on the outside, but the inside is really nice. But this is the thing. When we bought the property, the owner said he was going to dismantle this barn and sell it log with the logs all numbered so it could be put up on someone else's property. And I think
Hmm.
definitely if he did that, I don't know if I'd have bought this farm because that's a it's a real heritage building. It was built in the 1860s by logs right on the property. And the building to the left with the where the new boards went up around the window, that's the public washroom building. So during COVID, Kathleen, as my wife and I, we each got $10,000 for the COVID money for running a business or whatever it was for having a low income. And I spent my $10,000 getting a septic tank installed. And anyway, the barn roof, um, this is the second roof. The original roof would have had wooden shingles, but it's 100 feet long, and it's got a big cathedral vaulted ceiling inside, and it's really cool. And in this is characteristic of the Ottawa Valley, and even a bit, I think, in Shawville area. But it's the only part of Canada generally where there's a lot of log barns, and they're mostly made out of cedar. and some black ash and some white pine. But if they don't get maintained, when there's a strong wind, the wind literally picks the roof up off the barn and then drops it beside the barn, and then the whole thing is a disaster. And there's many, many barns around here where that happened. Um, I'm a big believer in regenerative agriculture, and that's what we do practice. But regenerative agriculture, it's not just about fertility. It's about regenerating the farm and the infrastructure and the buildings. And this barn, being the main, was really the only main barn on the property. Well, there's one other machine shed, um, but it's not functional in this economy. Um, about 20 years ago, no, 20, about 30, no, about 40 years ago, the previous owner cut out the second floor of the big of in front of that minivan. And that's where we were putting some of our round bales. But as the herd grew, we couldn't store them all just in there. And the whole barn, as you can imagine, it was designed for loose hay, and it also worked for small square bales. There's a trolley across the ridge line of the center of the roof, so you could pick up hay off of a hay wagon and have a pony or a horse pull a rope out the other end of the barn. Anyway, we wanted to get the roof fixed because the next thing we were doing was taking advantage of the funding for solar panels. Because another thing that's really important if you're running a business is, you're trying to reduce your costs and squeeze out as much efficiency as you can. So if the building can do multiple purposes, that's more efficiency. So it's an event hall, it's a solar power generator, um, and it provides a lunchroom for our summer staff, and it has some workspace. I use that area where the round bales were for building and fixing things and changing brakes on the truck and stuff like that. But so then I was just tired of having so much equipment outside all the time and losing hay to rot because I didn't have enough place. So then I decided to build another building, and it would provide another entrance way to the property. So this is another thing, to access customers and consumers and allow them to come to events and not have them parking on the road, and create a little spot where we can have a farmer's market on our property, and um, get equipment in protected indoors, and just have that and have more convenient access to the hay and to where we feed the cows in the winter. So this project cost an enormous amount of money, like over $100,000 for the barn and the parking lot. Um, so that's what we put up. That's 80 feet long and about 32 feet wide. And it's really great for when I cut hay on another property. This is just right along the frontage, and I can bring the hay in, and I have a vestibule there where I can do a farmer's market, or I can store equipment without opening the doors. And anyway, but this is another part, the property hadn't been invested in a long time, and we were coming into we're coming into an era now where local food starts to matter, and local food resiliency is an issue. Um, so anyway, we spent the money on that. And then when we grow vegetables for our mark for vegetable baskets that we now do vegetable baskets. Basically, we take the big garden and we just feed the cows. Like during the month of February when there's a lot of snow and the ground we hope is quite frozen, then we feed the cows right in the garden beds. And you can see some of the manure and uneaten hay on the ground. And that's just mulching the whole ground for us and doing a fair job of suppressing weeds. It brings in a few weeds too, but it adds a lot of fertility. And the green strips there, those are mostly walking strips between the fields. But, when you're trying to do minimum tillage, if you've got the garden already mulched, it suppresses um, grass and weed growth while the season is warming up because you can't just go and plant squash and tomatoes in May because they're going to get frosted. Um, so we do that. We also do a lot of cover crops. I didn't mention that, but we're even in these small garden plots that are, you know, half an acre in size, we're still putting buckwheat and radishes and uh, I tried some barley and some uh, fall rye works well, of course. Anyway, so this is an aerial view of the farm before the new barn was added, which is along the roadway. But you can see uh, all the places where we fed the cows over the winter. And so all those round circles are where we placed the bales. So that's all pasture land. So, and this is the home farm where the cows end up spending a lot of time. So it's an easy way to build the fertility. And then you can see a couple garden fields there. There's one area that's already planted to peas because this is an early May picture or maybe even late April. And you can see the windbreak. We planted that in the year 2003 about. And then you can see this whole area uh, where there's no grass showing, but it's just all matted hay. That's all garden there. Um, anyway, that's the regenerative agriculture part of it. And then, now farm tours are quite a thing. And this was a tour that came up from Lanark County and Perth, and they just called at the last minute because they had another farm they were going to, but it got canceled, and they found out about us, and
This
they
this
arrived.
large group called in at the last minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
And
it was maybe a month. Like they gave us a month
sure,
notice,
yeah.
but
Which year would this
this was last May,
okay.
like May 2025.
Hmm.
And you can see the coverall barn behind the bus and the
Yeah.
level parking lot. So I didn't want to pay for a big parking lot like that. Every time the dump truck door slammed, it was like 200 and it was like $330. And it's like
Mm.
it would just go, but we would never have been able to have a bus like this come in. Um, anyway, it just so we're kind of moving into this semi hospitality and taste and stuff like that. But I really think, you know, the fraction of people that that are going to be farmers, at least have a farm in the traditional sense, it's such an increasingly small part of the population that I think it's important to reach out and it helps build customers as well. Um, so this is the a few shots of the inside of the barn hall. It's got a red pine floor, like the floorboards are 1.5 inches thick. They're tongue and groove red pine. I bought the red pine from uh, big lumber mill up near Killaloe, Ontario, and I had it planed. The wood was tongue and groove and planed, and it sat in the barn for about 15 years because I didn't have the
Wow.
money to get it all installed. And you can see there's all new chinking between the logs. And anyway, so now people call us up and they have bridal showers are very popular. The mothers of the brides search these things out and they want to have a good event. Or we have bands, or we had a magician last year. We had comedians, and um, we want to do open mics and trivia nights. We can like raise some money for like there's a local food co-op. It's was the first online food cooperative in Ontario. It's called the Ottawa Valley Food Co-op, and so if we do like a trivia night, we can share the fundraising, but then it by partnering, it'll bring in more people and it'll create a bit less work. So my wife made up that sign. So the other thing is we created when I was president of the food cooperative, we created a thing called Farms Open because we noticed farm tours were happening more and more. And there's a thing called Doors Open Toronto, and now there's Doors Open Ottawa. So we called it Farms Open. And then we had about, we didn't get a lot of farms, but about 7 or 8 other farms in Renfrew County partnered on. And then the economic development officer for um, the Quebec side, actually, she lives in Ontario, and they expanded Farms Open into the Shawville, Quillon area. So anyway, we do that, and then we came up with this idea. Like people want to do, they're driving by all this land and they want to sort of just meet the animals and have lunch. So we started inventing these picnic in the pasture ideas. And then my wife made a connection with Ontario by bike. So people could drive and park in the parking lot and then go for a ride because the Opiongo Hills and the Madawaska Highlands and there's owl rafting, there's all kinds of stuff. So um usually people buy something from us. Anyway, it's just we're just trying to create something. And then there's a lot of motorcyclists come from Quebec. It seems to be more popular than in Ontario. And they they like to get these like there's these tourism badges. There's a badge for riding the Highlands. So they come out and they
Hmm.
get a badge. And sometimes they buy a whole whack of butter tarts and stuff. And anyway, there's that. And then where we bought the Hayfield property, there's a little 1950s farmhouse on there. It's very cute. It's fairly small, but we decided to turn it into a farm stay. And it was also a place uh, where we have volunteers come on the farm, and during COVID, we had them stay in there because that just made it safer. And dark skies are becoming a thing. Like
Hmm.
people come, people from we have volunteers coming from Europe, and one guy, he's walking from our commercial kitchen because we have the woofers stay in the bedrooms of where our commercial kitchen is. And they have their dinners, their meals at our place because they're supposed to live with you like you're sharing culture. Anyway, he's walking along. He comes out of the building at night and he goes, I can't see my feet because it was dark, right? But these are people from Europe. They've never, like, if you live in an urban area in Europe, it's
Yeah.
never dark.
Yeah.
And they never seen stars. Like, they've never seen them. Like, I can't believe people have not seen the Milky Way. I mean,
Mhm.
I grew up seeing it, even though I didn't grow up on a farm. The suburban areas weren't. weren't all light polluted in the 1970s, and they were full of bats and everything. And anyway, just but it's such a changed world now. So people really want this stuff. And this is the second last slide. I wanted to say something about getting people to come and work for you. So these are two employees actually that we hired in 2023, and the woman is a culinary arts graduate from George Brown College in Toronto, and they wanted to move up to the Ottawa area. So they took a job with us, and we didn't. She goes, "Can my boyfriend work for you too?" And, I said, "Sure." So we got two of them with one interview. And he helped us do a lot of renovation stuff. But anyway, when we started doing a bit of the agritourism, that's when it became a lot easier to hire qualified people, and people that had real skills and real enthusiasm, and like, our top of the class high school students kind of thing, because they didn't see themselves as just farm laborers, and they'd be scared if their job was just to drive a tractor because they don't have that all those skills. But if they know they're going to be helping to run events and meeting with customers and cooking in the kitchen, and they're not going to be the only student, like some last year we had 5 summer students. We kept them all busy, but normally we wouldn't have hired 5, but some of them were my friends, like my son's friends. And my son never wanted to work on our farm. He goes, "No one wants to work on their own farm because that's boring." But then we were hiring his friends from his school because if he wasn't going to work for us, someone else had to. And then he started working on the farm with them, and he thought days were fun and the day went by quick. And then the next year, he only wanted to work for us. And anyway, that was a great thing. And then um, we we also utilize a lot of international people, and which was great when our son was, you know, 7 years old and up to being a teenager, because then it's like he's traveling the world, even though he's stuck on a farm, because people would come from Tokyo or Germany, lots from Germany and France. We can speak French pretty well. Mine's not as good as my wife's, but well, we had a couple come from Bretagne. And by the end of the 3 weeks there, I was just speaking French all the time. Maybe not very grammatical, but anyway. And so the nice thing about taking the woofers, it's like if you put an ad, with this sharing economy, you can put an ad on a platform. Like I remember when an ad in the Toronto Star would cost $7 a word, and it would run for 1 week. Now you have your platform on the Woof Canada platform. It costs you $50 for a whole year, and you're advertising all over the world. you know, so this is a transformational thing. And we had cabinet, like there were guys that were cabinet makers that came to our farm, and so the guy built the entire vanity in the bathroom for our, now we have on-farm bathrooms. He built that vanity like just using my table saw and my tools. And like that was uh, an awesome exchange. Anyway, um, there's the last slide, just showing a few pictures I couldn't squeeze in anywhere else. The picture with the pumpkins is we did a pumpkin fundraiser for my son's primary school, where I took potting pots to the school, and they planted the seeds in the greenhouse pots. and I germinated the plants and we grew them on the farm. And then the class came out and planted them, and then another class came out in October and harvested them, and then they sold them as a fundraiser. And anyway, you know, so I guess to close off, I think I've kind of said everything, but the regenerative agriculture, it's about regenerating the farm from every angle, from a community level. And if you saw our logo, the logo is actually, I don't know if there's a picture of the logo. It's it's a there's a picture of the logo. There's actually a person kind of growing out of the ground. And so that's kind of what we're doing. We're not just growing food, we're trying to grow um, everyone else along with us. And so that's my talk.
Marshall, thank you. Um, it's really interesting to see uh, the way that it almost seems that you were pulled somewhat unwittingly into the agri-tourism um, business. And I'm wondering, you spoke a bit about your reservations about how when you first thought about agritourism, you thought, that's not actually farming, and that you didn't really want to do it. Um, I'm wondering now that you are really fully invested in having this beautiful dining hall, having a series of customers who come to visit you, what would you kind of do different, or what would your advice be to people who are thinking of getting into agritourism, taking a farm that they currently have and making it something that is an experience for the public while also being a farm that produces any kind of product that they can get there?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of farms, like in this near where I live, there are much larger grain farms. Like a friend of mine has 1,000 acres and she grows canola. And there's another farm that grows hemp. It's one of the biggest hemp producers in Ontario for sure. Um, and so a lot of those types of farms, they're relying on the marketing boards and the industry associations to do a lot of their outreach for them. But when you buy a farm that is, you know, like, I wasn't in line to inherit my mom's farm that she grew up on. So, I had to buy what was affordable and I got this 50 acres. And I think, you know, I think you need like I was at there's a strategic plan for agriculture being developed for Renfrew County. And since I sell direct to consumer, I'm advocating for that angle. And it kind of dawned on me that I have to do my own, like I'm even though most farmers are price takers, even when you sell direct to consumer, you're somewhat of a price taker. But if you can cultivate the right clients, you can help to set your prices. So to me, those are some of the advantages of reaching out. And then you really are getting that community supported agriculture and you're sharing, I really think sharing the land. I I mean, so I've been, I commit to going to a lot of training workshops, whether it's the National Farmers Union or the Canadian Organic Growers or Ecological Farmers of Ontario. And so there's a lot of messaging that if you go to those conferences, you do hear important advice. And one advice I heard at one talk was you have to love people if you're going to grow food. And I thought, wow, yeah, that really landed with me because that's my personality and my attitude. Like when when we have a visitor coming to the farm or a guest or someone's coming by to pick something up, like that gets me out of bed in the morning.
Hmm.
But I'm not that motivated to just do, to go and ride the tractor for a whole day to cut hay or something like
Yeah.
that. But if I know I'm gonna meet a customer or have an interaction like that, that really uh that really excites my personality and I feel like I'm doing something for someone and it seems like less of a job. So I think that's the attitude you should have if you want to do agritourism.
Um, yeah, I mean, Brian Maloney, who's on this call, I remember, who's a grass-fed beef producer in Thurso, has a large dining hall, and I remember him saying, "I never really realized until I did this that a big part of agriculture is kind of just making people happy and giving them a product that they love." Were you able to you spoke just a moment ago about finding your clients and your customers. Were you able to bring a lot of them from the Westboro farmers market that you had in Ottawa, or was it more from word of mouth within the community closer to Renfrew County? Um, when you talk to the people who come and visit the farm, what sense do you get about where they heard about you and where that big part of your customer base and your income is coming from?
Well, we did get a lot of people from Ottawa would come out to the farm, and we did a lot of deliveries in Ottawa. We would combine a bunch of orders and then, bring in a bunch of beef or vegetables and stuff. Um, but over time that fades. It's like it's incredible how, families grow up and people move and they get older and they eat less, their kids aren't at home. And you really do need to keep building a customer base because you're constantly losing customers because they move or they age out of being a substantial buyer of food, actually. Um, but like my wife does such a good job on Instagram and Facebook that we get a lot of calls now. Um, and I wouldn't, it's pretty common for someone to give us a call and ask if we've got this or that. And we're pretty well known in the community. Um, and there's a lot of people with beef cattle in Renfrew County because like the east part of Renfrew County is all dairy and cash crop, and the west part where we are, where it gets all rocky, is all beef cows a lot. Um, but even there's a big grass-fed beef producer, and they're uh, scaling back. So you get a lot of customers that knew about you who know that that farmer is retiring. Now they're switching over to buy from you. Or there's people in this, like just people in the city. Like now people want to know a farmer. Like before,
Yeah.
it wasn't that important to know a farmer. But if people, if I say to someone that I'm a farmer, they're like, it's like they're meeting some B-level actor or something. It's like, oh, you're someone that
Yeah.
matters in the world now. And then they go, they'll ask you, well, do you have this or whatever, or can I get this from you? So it happens a little bit more organically now. Uh, but you know, we're in a bad place for selling vegetables. Like Renfrew County has a lower average income than other parts of Ontario, and it's long distances between villages. And like there's a farm uh near Pembroke. It's so close to Pembroke, she doesn't even have to pack the veggie baskets. People just walk into her cold room and they pick what they are allowed to pick and they put it in their own basket. And she doesn't have to do any deliveries. And she does like 60 baskets a week or something like that. We're at the other end of the county where no one's going to drive, all the way from Pembroke just to get a veggie basket. So
Hmm.
um, we lucked out last year where, here's an example of people reaching out. Is the Eganville Seniors Needs called us last May, and they said, we have a grant to buy food for people who are food insecure. And normally we just take the grant money and go to Walmart or No Frills and spend it, and then we give out these food baskets to people who are at risk. And they said, "Can we buy food? Can we buy local vegetables for our baskets from you?" And I was like, "Oh my God, like where have you been? Like
Yeah.
what we're here for, you know?" And we started the basket program last year as like a second or third attempt, thinking everyone's so mad at Donald Trump, they're going to want to buy local. And we only sold about 5 local baskets. And then all of a sudden, the seniors' needs come along and they were buying like 20 baskets every 2 weeks because the seniors aren't big households. So it was a
Mm.
smaller basket. And then they connected us up with the First Nation Reserve in Pikwakanagan, and we added another bunch of baskets. And that like saved our whole payroll for last summer.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a really important market, and it helps to because the seniors that these food baskets are going to, they're people that would have had a real connection to a farm. Someone in their family grew up on a farm. Um, and so they would really appreciate the food. And uh, so we're trying to work that market niche some more. If because it was also a great thing because now you're bringing 20 baskets to one parking lot, like at the seniors' home, and it's done. It was very efficient. Um, and so that's a potential market, and I'd like to do some wholesaling as well. Um, but it's really immature around here in terms of like uh in Ontario there's a local food act, and that's the province of Ontario says that if you're a daycare or a hospital or seniors home and you get Ontario government funding, then you should buy local. That's what the local, but it's not a law, it's just an encouragement, and it's ignored. And a lot of these places don't want to deal with local farmers. I don't even know if they know, like Renfrew County is not known as a vegetable growing area, and
Hmm.
they just get the food comes in on a Cisco truck and they deal with it. But um, that would, you know, there's money in wholesale because you don't have to stand at a farmer's market all day just to get, $3 a pound for your carrots. You'd happily take $2 a pound, uh, or so if you were delivering 50 pounds to, a hospital or something like that. Um, so
Um, You spoke a little while ago about people coming to the farm and the number of calls you'll get. I'm wondering if part of the agritourism business necessarily ropes you into kind of performing an educational role for a lot of those people. I know our friend Stephanie Maynard, who runs Quinn Farm down here near the Montreal Island, says she's continually amazed how often she will get calls of people asking if they can come pick strawberries in February. Um, and if that is happening when people visit your farm, how do you think about it, and how do you deal with those moments when you're meeting someone who's really quite interested and good-natured, but simply has zero agricultural knowledge to go along with that enthusiasm?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's actually pretty common that
Yeah.
people haven't really thought it through. Like, how is this possible to get certain foods out of season? Um, but you know, I'm just honored that they're taking the time to go out of their way. Like they're going out of their way, they're searching on the internet instead of just going to Loblaws or Provigo or whatever, you know. So I think that's, you know, I think how much that they're putting in some effort. So I give them credit for that, and rather than criticize them that uh they're not um, that they don't have the farming knowledge. But I was gonna say there was something along that line. Oh yeah, so a lot of people come like with the farm stay. We just had two guests last weekend, and it was a perfect example of like more and more people are living in apartments, right? And even like we go to some we're buying some used furniture from a couple in Ottawa. They opened the garage um, and to, I guess, get the couch out. But you looked in their garage, there were no tools. you know,
Mm,
there were no tools in this garage, just like the couch. They didn't even have a screwdriver to take the door off so we could fit, furniture through the door. I had to get it out of my truck. But like, so we've got this whole urban population now. They they want they're curious about where their food comes from, about these like farms aren't provincial parks, but they're a huge part of the land base. And so if you can tap into their interest and maybe convert their interest into support for your business, that's a smart thing to do. And the couple, so they came to our farm stay on the weekend. They live in an apartment in Ottawa. Um, they, they said, so how can we order food from you now that we know, like we've seen like they wanted to help. They booked the farm stay, but what they were hoping was, can we be like a farmer for the day? Like they didn't want to use the farm stay like it's a motel. They wanted to help. Can we help you feed the cows? So yeah, I ended up
wow.
spending quite a few hours with them.
Huh.
I put them on the tractor and we went out with this round bale and we did a whole meet and greet with the cows, and I taught them how to read sign language from the cows, and be one guy had a PhD, so he was a good listener. and, and his wife actually worked in social science, and they were just the perfect couple. And
Hmm.
then they helped me put out the hay, and they they were just learning about everything. And then they ended up buying, well, they bought about $50 worth of food, and then they asked how they could keep buying when they're back in Ottawa. So
Mhm.
this is and you learn, if you, they wanted to be invited next time there's an event at the barn. And then they said, well, maybe you should be working with Outward Bound, because she said, oh, we
Ah,
do
okay.
training. They're like out, they want to do camping. And they said like your hall would be a perfect place to get the lecture and learn about it. And I said, well, we're not on water though. And they said that's okay because most of the training wasn't on the water. It was like, you know, it was just other skills, first aid skills and planning skills. And like we have a 9 by 16 projection screen in the barn, so we can do um, like retreat type seminars and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's perfect for that. We did a farm safety training workshop. The National Farmers Union paid for it, but we had 4 different schools in Renfrew County. They all came by bus, and we had the 2 local fire chiefs and uh, the local tractor dealer. He was demonstrating safety with farm tractors, and the fire chiefs gave other types of farm safety, and they talked about the solar panels and the risk and the organized and the clutter, the clutter problem that we had. And then we also got posters from a workplace safety organization. We talked about their rights as workers and all that stuff. So, you know, the farm is kind of like people like to think of it as a meeting place as well. It's like another
Yeah.
kind of community center, but a functional one or something. So,
But that sounds like it's, the old business model of building community, getting customers slowly one at a time, and also what you mentioned about farm to fork and even the logo of community kind of growing out of it. So that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, like I'd have to, I would, to be honest, like we're not making a lot of money off the agritourism yet, but it's a form of marketing, and it helped a lot with our labor force,
Hmm.
helping us to attract good workers. Um, and when you do hold an event in the hall, there's 60 people showing up, and then you get all that word of mouth from their good experience. So a lot of the investments we made are really like, well, this is what this property needs if this is going to be functioning as a farm, in the future, kind of a thing. So,
And that's the part of the regenerative aspect you're talking about.
yeah,
Marshall,
that's
thank
part of
you.
it.
Thank you so much for telling us this story. It's a fascinating and circuitous route for building a farm business and also for bringing some life back to a piece of land and a piece of heritage as well. So thank you so much for being here for the QFA.
Oh, it's
Um,
my pleasure. I hope it wasn't, you know, too dull for
that no,
people.
no, people are writing their appreciation as we speak in the chat. So
Oh, yeah, I don't have the chat showing.
thank you very much for doing that. I would like to announce a few different events that we have because on April 15th, here, I'm trying to screen share, Marshall, and we were having problems with this before.
Oh, I gave it back to you.
Yeah, maybe it's not going to let me do it. Let's see. Oh, yes, it will. Um, on April 15th. Can people see? It says pour plus d'informations, plus d'initiatives. We are having. Can people see that? My screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah. On April 15th, which is also a Wednesday, we are having our next video conference, which is specifically about collective takeovers in Quebec businesses. Now, this is not to be confused with corporate takeovers. This is the better kind of takeover where a group of people assume communal ownership of a business, and in this case, particularly a farm business. Uh, we're going to be joined by Jérôme Garnier from CQCM, the Conseil des what is the the Centre québécois de Conseil municipal, and he will be talking about different kinds of collective ownership that you can apply to Quebec businesses, particularly with farm businesses. That's going to be on April 15th, which should be an interesting thing for people who are interested in getting into farm business, but are maybe feeling some of the difficulties with um, farm startup capital. And on May 27th, we will be speaking. I don't know if we have ever had a sheep and lamb producer talk about grass-fed sheep, both for meat and for fiber. But our friends from Black Sheep Farm near Owen Sound are going to be talking about that. That's on May 27th. But before that, and this is even the more important date, we are going to be having a QFA Info Day, which is on March 30th at uh, at the Faculty Lounge, the McDonald Stewart Building of McDonald Campus. That's in St. Anne de Bellevue. That is Monday, March 30th. And if you are a QFA board member, then it's fantastic and even expected that you would be there. Um, and the main presentation will be by Clovis Raymond Laruelle, who's the Research and Farming Policies Coordinator with the Fédération de la Relève Agricole du Québec, that is also known as the FRAC, who advocate for the next generation of farm owners, farm workers in Quebec. There will also be a lunch at Taj Hall across the road from McDonald campus as we normally do. That is Monday, March 30th at 9:30. And if you are a QFA board member, then you've gotten an email about it. But everyone's invited. We will be joined by the students from and some faculty from the Farm Management and Technology program. So that is on March 30th, and you can look in the Quebec Farmers Advocate and on the QFA Facebook page for more video conferences just like this one. Marshall, it's really great making your acquaintance and having you join us here and learning more about your farm. I really thank you very much from everyone here at the QFA, and we hope to talk to you again. Thanks.
Well, thanks for inviting me. And good luck with this season, everyone.
Hey, thanks everyone. Good luck with the weather. Nice to see so many familiar faces, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you, Marshall. Greatly appreciated.
Good night.
Good night. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Brenda. I hope I did justice to
Yes, I just
the
unmuted
March
myself
30th.
because I was going to jump in, and I'm thinking, no need to jump in. He's got
Okay. All right, good.
it. Perfect. That was
And
wonderful.
that's 9:30 and we're I guess it's just oh, so I guess it's really just a half day because we
Oh yeah,
start
yeah. We only have the faculty lounge for 2 hours from.
okay,
So
and then we go across the street to Taja.
yeah, yeah.
Hey, we're getting two lunches this year. Nice.
I know. It's
Okay. Um okay, I gotta go put Garnet to bed over here.
yeah. Um,
Thank you so much.
can we just make a point of touching base tomorrow
Yeah, sure.
in
Yeah.
the afternoon for a quick call?
Yep,
I'm
that's
sort of
what
tied up in the morning, but in the afternoon I'll be free.
yep. No, that's
Okay.
what I was gonna suggest as well. So perfect.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, good
Bye.
night.